Welcome to the Love, Sex, and Leadership podcast, where you can discover simple tantric teachings to embody your true power, awaken your soul's wisdom, and live an inspired life as a natural, intuitive, and heart-centered leader. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Love, Sex, and Leadership. I'm very excited to have my friend Charlene Gisele with us, and coming in from the south of France. I'm in central Portugal. We both determined it's very hot in Europe today, and I've excited for this conversation. Especially, it's around the topics of burnout. It's around the topics of how we as a human sometimes push too much. And Charlene is a burnout specialist. She's a hypnotherapist and lots of experience and knowledge in this field, and very excited to dive deep with you all today. So welcome, Charlene, today to the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Amazing. So yeah, tell me a little bit of your story and what makes you now kind of helping people through burnout. I imagine there's probably some strong burnout in your life, but share a little bit with the
Oh,
audience of
yes,
es-
yes, yes.
especially for those people that are the go-getters that are always pushing and going and going and going, and yeah, what your experience was with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you. Well, look, the truth is, it started all the way from childhood, as most things do, don't they? I know you're
Mhm, mhm,
a trauma-informed practitioner and you do a lot of great work in that field. So I would say that my childhood was actually one of those golden childhoods. So not perhaps, the when you start with it started with my childhood, you're expecting a big trauma revelation. But with me, it was a bit different in the sense that it was one of those golden childhood with a lot of expectation. So
mm,
I was the last of a big family of four siblings. I was adored by my family, and with all their love, they put immense expectations on me. Not in a way that had any bad intention, of course, but my
mhm,
dad was incredibly successful. He was very ambitious, had a very accomplished business. My mom didn't work, she was raising the kids, and he brought me up in a way that success was inevitable and I was going to
mm,
be the top girl in class, the grade A student. I was going to aim high. There was no other option but Oxford or Cambridge, and you could do anything in life, but it would be so much better if it was something that involved being a lawyer.
mhm, mhm,
So, and frankly, that's all I wanted to do. Some little girls dream about being a princess or riding unicorns. My dream was to be a lawyer. That's all I
mhm.
wanted to do and make my father proud. So, yeah, that's really my childhood. I was so studious, so conscientious. I wanted to learn fast, be the best, work hard, make a lot of money. I know it sounds
Mhm,
very materialistic, but that was my definition of success, right?
mm,
And so guess what? I did that. And
mm,
yes, I was a high-flying lawyer. I joined one of the largest American law firm, and it was an amazing work experience, but I became completely obsessed with it. And frankly,
mhm,
it became an addiction. I became
mhm,
completely addicted to work. So
mm,
much so that my marriage broke apart quickly after a few years of working at that pace. I found myself being a divorcee. I couldn't sustain my health. I was diagnosed with clinical insomnia and general anxiety disorder, and I became a shadow or shell of the person that I was. I dropped all my passions, I dropped my hobbies, I even dropped my friends because all I wanted to do was work.
mm,
And honestly, I think I would have continued to do that, but then my father had a burnout-driven heart attack, and
mm,
that's the moment that shifted everything for me.
mm, mm. So he has the heart attack, and then there's a place of self-reflection that happens, or what's some of that process? Because this to me is it's interesting states. I think for everyone we have these different breaking points, and sometimes it takes like multiple breaking points. It sounds like this is one that really hit close to your heart, literally
Yes.
in some ways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good, good. Good comment here. The truth is, I saw my future when that happened to him because
Mm,
I was doing everything in my power to become a version of him. So when he had a
mhm,
heart attack, first of all, there was very little chances that he was going to survive, and thank God he did. But when you're facing a life or death situation and doctors are telling you that they're not sure that your person you love so much in the world is going to make the night, it
mhm,
shifts your paradigm in life.
mm,
So I thought, is this my version of my future? Because so
mhm,
far, all I ever wanted to do was to make daddy proud and
mm,
to follow his lead and his footsteps. But
mhm,
then, the fear of losing him was immense. And I thought, well, all this life we had a very privileged childhood. We've never been left to desire for anything. We had a beautiful home and things we didn't need. But then suddenly we could be about to lose our father, right? And then
mm,
nothing really meant anything at that
mhm,
point.
mhm,
So for me, it was the decision that made me realize I wanted to be an ambassador for really high powered, really ambitious professionals, not just lawyers, any professionals that were really, really ambitious,
mm,
that were actually putting their life at risk because of their
mm,
ways of working, like my
mhm,
father did and like I was doing.
mm, mm. So in that timeline of things is like I find these moments happen and we hit I can look at many different times in my life of hitting a rock bottom. And then how much quickly after that was there actually a place of self-reflection and then change? Because it requires a change in lifestyle, requires a change, and we as humans, we resist change. Like you were working consistently, you're working hard, money was coming in. So like what was the timeline in that actually made you have a strong change in your life where you could start to see an embodied difference?
Yeah, I love that question. And exactly as you said, it wasn't overnight, right? So, first of all, I had huge amounts of commitment. I had a flat in London, I had a work I couldn't quit from one day to the next. I was still married at the time. So, between the decision to make a change and the making a change, there were months that happened, but the way I did it is quite radical and quite brutal. And I'm not sure I
Mm.
would recommend to do that. But
Tell me more.
I packed everything up. I
Hmm.
quit. I left my flat. I got a divorce and I went to live in Bali, as a lot of people do. And the reason I did that was because I was on a quest for my own healing at this point. I wanted to understand what were my sort of shadows and my darker days and the reason why I got myself into this position because frankly I don't like to use the word broken, because I don't think anyone is ever broken, just we are on the path of repair. But I was in a pretty bad shape mentally,
Mm,
emotionally and physically. So the reason I decided to do that is because I had always been drawn to yoga and meditation, but I had of course no time to do it whatsoever. So I thought I need an immersion, almost
mm,
like an addict removes themselves from the substance. My substance was work. So I
mm,
needed something quite drastic. And then shortly after that, I actually took it even further and I went to an ashram in India for 3 months.
mm,
So even more drastic because I thought I need something like really deep immersion where I have no access to emails, no triggers, no access to my suits, no labels of being a lawyer. And so going from being a American law firm lawyer in oil and gas litigation to going to an ashram in India to meditate with my guru was quite a shift.
mhm, mhm. That's a strong shift. That sounds like a few shifts of mine when I was actually, I mean, my last job in the maritime field actually was with oil and gas. And yeah, I left that a couple of times, but one of the first times I left it, I didn't get on a flight to Kenya, and I got on a flight to California, and I started a program in spiritual psychology. So I went from one side to the other side. So I understand the shift, the radical shift, quite strongly for sure. Um, and I'm curious with that because in the radical shift, and now as you've kind of regulated yourself into the work you're doing now and the hypnotherapy and helping people with burnout. Like, where do you notice that? Because even in this work, like the amount of projects, the amount of things that I do, I'm managing properties, I'm working with clients, I'm running this podcast. Like, I'm tracking my own level of like how much I can manage and do, and trying to find balance. And I find different ways to do it. But I'm curious, for you, in your experience that you went through, like, what do you do now conscientiously to not make your current work, because it's always worked in one way, shape, or form,
Of
not to
course.
the same degree as what you did before? What are some of the small things that you might do?
Oh, I love that question so much. And I think it's such a significant one because let's face it, and let's just start with a bit of a truth check. Because I'm burnout prone, I will always be burnout prone. In other
Mm,
words, you don't make a type A ambitious person become chilled
mhm,
overnight, right?
mhm,
Like,
mhm.
I'm never not going to be an ambitious, driven, conscientious professional.
Yeah.
But I have made some serious changes, and especially around the way I love and the way I think. And when
Mm,
I say love, when I exited my previous marriage, I realized with hindsight that there were many toxic traits in that relationship and that marriage.
mm,
And when I started my new path, more spiritual path, much more aligned path, I also met a partner who's now become my husband, who is really calm, really grounded, really reflective, and really aligned in terms of health and well-being. We actually met outside a yoga studio, so you can't do a lot more aligned than that. And the reason I mentioned that though is because I think it's so important, not to say that you need to be dependent upon somebody else to find your equilibrium, but nurturing that relationship while building a business and setting some boundaries in place so that I wouldn't neglect my love for love and
mhm,
my desire to be in a romantic relationship has been such a learning curve. Because if I'm being honest, in my previous marriage, I did prioritize work over my partner every single opportunity I got. In
mm,
this current marriage, I learn to set boundaries. In other words, if I have a commitment with my husband, like be it a date night or a cinema or he's cooked for me, I am not going to let work come in the way. Yes,
mm,
there's going to be unexpected, urgent emails. I'm not going to lie and say that never happens, of course. And we both understand that. We're both professional. But I put things in the diary, like I send him Google invites. I know that sounds extreme, but that's the way I know I can honor the space that we've created for our marriage, because otherwise it's going to get booked by my assistant for my clients. So, yes, I do send, diary invites to my husband to have a date with
mm,
me, but it works, right?
mhm. And do you, this is something I started doing years ago. I mean, like, I generally don't never do sessions Saturday or Sunday, and now I schedule off like a whole day on Wednesday. That generally I don't have anything. Sometimes I have to fit a client in there and do that, but like that's helped me quite a bit. Do you find yourself still as an entrepreneur working 5 days a week, or do you have like a scheduled day off that you do, or how do you manage that?
I love that question. It's a really important question. And I hope that my answer won't be shocking, but I want to keep it really authentic and real. I don't do weekends in the traditional way. So
Yeah.
it's actually quite common for me to work on Saturdays and Sundays because, especially with coaching and hypnotherapy, my clients are more available at the weekend. But what I do is I take what I call clean breaks and clean days off. So
Hmm.
they're not your conventional weekends, they're not your conventional July or August holidays, they're clean days. Typically, it's a Monday because Monday they're so busy. They have to be focused on work. So their priority is not to get hypnotized or to get coached, right?
Fair
So
enough.
Mondays are usually a good day for me to have a clean day. But if I have a clean day, I mean clean. So I'm not going to be on emails. I'm not going to check my notifications, and I'm not going to be available. So I put systems in place that buffer my stress away and allow me to fully recover. If I compare that to back when I was a lawyer, I was always on. So even on conventional weekends, I was still checking emails and getting email anxieties. Now, I may be working Saturday and Sunday, but if I'm not working on a Monday, I'm truly not working.
Mm, mm, that's great. Yeah, it's my My beloved. We have actually have a baby coming in September. Very exciting.
Oh, is it your first baby?
It's our first baby. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And she went through, I mean, before we knew each other years ago, she was working in the kind of corporate world and went through a pretty strong burnout. And so she kind of tracks her energy, now, she's not working traditionally in the sense, I mean, financially taking care of her, but, we're working on a lot of real estate projects and things. And we can really, I noticed that like when that energy is just going and going and going, and we both actually starting right around September, where I'm taking a full 2 months off with the baby coming in, and just preparing ourselves for that way. But I like that word you use with clean break, because it feels um, that it's really an intentional time to not have anything else around. And I don't know that I'm a full type A personality. I mean, maybe other people would say differently, but there's this place of wanting to, like, I find it wanting to be in service to my soul, and wanting to support, and wanting to serve. And I'm curious how this feels for you, which is like for me, like I'm running off in 15 to 20 retreats a year, and I'm working a lot, and I have a lot of things on. I mean, of course, sometimes it feels like work, but in many ways, it doesn't have the same feeling as of work as when I used to work on ships and I was a mariner. So, how does your relationship with work now feel as an entrepreneur? And I imagine doing things that you love compared to the days in the law firm.
I love that question, and it brings a big smile on my face because there are two things that I love most in my business. The first one is the feeling that I get when I come out of coaching session and I see a shift, or I see progress, or I get a Christmas card from the kiddies, or I get to meet the cat or the pet of the family. Here's my Labradoodle, or I get to meet the wife, or I get to see that something's shifted. And
Mm,
that I don't like to say I made a difference, because it's always my clients who made the difference, but I've been honored to be part of that shift and somehow a messenger to
mm,
support that.
mhm,
I often find clients in very, very dark places. When I mean find, sounds like, I'm finding them. Perhaps that's the wrong word, but when they come to me, typically as a burnout advisor, is because they've hit, if not rock bottom, pretty close to that. So I typically deal with clients who have even, contemplated ideas of suicide ideation. They've contemplated just quitting their jobs, but also doing something that would injure their self. I've had clients that have deliberately broken a limb to be on leave, because they were afraid that if they were found out to have a mental health issue, they will be perceived as weak in the office.
oh,
So I've had
wow.
a client that deliberately broke a leg so that they could get time off. You see, so I deal with kind of the really dark side of the psychology. And so when I come to them, I really want to be there, and sure, their session is intense. But then when I get to see them on the other side, when they're thriving again and they're well, and I've been part of that process, that joy and that satisfaction, yes, it's work, but it brings me a sense of happiness that's so immense
Mm,
that nourishes my soul. And it's interesting that you've asked me that question, because I think that the reason I wanted to be a lawyer in the first place was to get to feel this feeling, and I never really
mm,
felt it in a big corporation. And I'm so sad about that, because one of the reasons I wanted to be a lawyer was to, yes, there was the money and the status and all of that, right? But deep down, I believe that there was something about being the person who helps, that I
mm,
had a
mhm.
fantasy that of all the professions, I could have chosen trader or something else. Like if all you want is make money, there are other things that you can do other than being a lawyer, right? But I
Yeah.
think deep down there was a fantasy to help and to serve. And
Mm,
unfortunately, because of the way the corporate world is structured, I didn't get that human proximity that made me feel as satisfied. Whereas now it's so intimate, the work that I do. We talk about the dark days, the thoughts that we can't even communicate to others, the addictions, the behaviors, the secret behaviors, right? I have a lot of clients that are
Mm,
binging, purging, using alcohol for relief, using drugs, things they couldn't ever disclose on the public place. And they say that to me. So you become a
mm,
confident. And there are many days where, as hard work as it is, that does not feel like work. So when I get
mm,
asked the question, well, that's heavy lifting you're doing, like those are intense session. How do you recharge? Well, yes, I have a protocol to recharge my energy and to meet my client where they're at. But I, I I truly think that it's almost like a gift exchange. Like I'm so grateful that I have this ability to help.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember a similar feeling for myself when I started studying psychology, and I was living in LA, and I was starting to work with clients, and suddenly it was like there was this like lightness, and I could work for hours and dedicate all this time and energy, and it was so much like I was just lit up by it. And even, I have a similar feeling after working with after the end of a session or the end of a retreat or a weekend workshop. There's just this like, wow, okay, I've made a shift and a change in, either one individual or a group of individuals. And that's like, it's kind of unlike anything else in many ways, that I've been able to access and to touch upon. So yeah, I can definitely appreciate what you're sharing.
Mm.
um, this is more of a question around human behavior and looking at addictions, and I'm sure for yourself, having looked at your own addictions and the addictions that we carry as humans. But this part of us that is addicted to work and is addicted to almost suffering in a way, and addicted to long hours. Like what do you find? Of course, it's different for everyone, but what do you find are some of the universal pieces that almost, drive people to such a level of unhealthiness? And even, when they know it's bad and that they continue to do it, or, smoking is bad and we continue to do it. And, we have all these different addictions, or, you shouldn't have 10 beers at the end of a day, but people do. It's like all these addictions, each one has its own. But I'm curious from especially the side of kind of the psychotherapy and those pieces, like what your thoughts are on the realms of addictions, and why we as a humanity in a groups of individuals are so addicted prone.
Yes, great question. So there are many components. There is physiological components and there are psychological components to this answer. The first one, from a psychological standpoint, and I know this is a bold thing to say, but I'm pretty confident to say it. I'm yet to find any professional who is suffering from burnout and work addiction who hasn't had some kind of big T trauma in their life, specifically around the childhood. And it doesn't have to be trauma in the sort of conventional thought of trauma, but it can be a feeling of abandonment from the parent. It can be undue pressure. It can be any kind of trauma, perceived trauma as well, because really an addiction is often a response to a traumatic experience that would have happened years and years before. And it could be something somatic as well. Like, for instance, I fell off my father's Range Rover, total freak accident, nobody's fault, like fell backward when I was age 3. And as a
Mm,
result of the fall, I lost momentary vision and my eyes. I'll spare graphic details for anyone who's a bit sensitive, but it was a pretty gruesome accident, so much so
mhm,
that I had to have an emergency eye operation because it triggered strabism and I couldn't see straight. It was pretty horrible. And I've had a traumatic response, like a severe PTSD from that event, of remembering not to be able to see or to see well for a while, and post-op as well, with like very uncomfortable vision, etc. I didn't remember that in my conscious mind, but I remembered all of those trauma during hypnotherapy with my first hypnotherapist. And what was really interesting is from that point onward, I developed a really, really strong sense of I had to work hard. I had to be the best. I had to show up. I had to make sure. So I developed stories about how I needed to show up in the world as a certain version, because, I was at one point mocked in school for having certain kind of goggles, or, so you develop from bullying or anything that you've gone through, or it can be a somatic trauma. So this is just an example. right? Or it can be a form of violence that you've experienced, emotional violence or physical violence. It can be that one of your parents didn't really pay attention to you. It could be that you were bullied in school because of your weight. It could be that you could, any kind of trauma goes. But when it comes to work, then it gives you the opportunity to forge a new identity where you're good at
Mm,
something. So, most people who are addicted to work are addicted to work because it's one thing they feel really good at and get rewarded for really highly. So,
mm,
if you have something that you perceive as a weakness, when you work and you're good, so that's why it's very common with people that are suffering from example of being dyslexic or even having a bit of ADHD or being on a spectrum. So you would work that much more to compensate for what would be perceived as a challenge that you're looking to overcome. So I have many of my clients that have actually been diagnosed later in years as ADHD or on the spectrum. Now, that's not considered to be a trauma, but it can be very traumatic to be in school
mhm,
and not to understand why you're the odd one out, why some
mm,
people work this way and you don't work that way. But then you realize you're super smart. And when you get to work, you can make a lot of money and you get a lot of rewards. You get the promotion, you get the big paycheck. So, how nice is it? Why wouldn't you do more of one thing you get to realize you're good at when everything else is against the odds, right?
mhm, mhm. Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's very
No,
common.
it's a natural conclusion. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead,
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, yeah. It's very common to find one, two, three, four, five forms of trauma, big T trauma or small T traumas, whenever we look at work addictions, because we often compensate for something that we feel somehow weaker about on one front. So, another good reason, if I can say this, for work addiction is not being in a really good relationship. So, for example, my toxic marriage was a vicious circle because
Mm,
being in the toxic marriage contributed to me working even harder, but working even harder contributed to the relationship becoming even more toxic, right?
mhm,
So, it's
mhm,
very common to meet professionals who are burnt out, who have sexless marriages, very low libido, or very toxic marriages or
mhm,
partnerships with very high risk sexual behavior, with a lot of passionate but not conscious relationship. Because again, you're trying to gamble your life away and get that kind of dopamine hit to feel something, right? So,
yep,
work addiction often breeds another kind of addiction. So, in my
mm,
line of work, when I work with professionals that suffer from work addiction, it's not uncommon to discover that there is underpinning alcohol addiction, or drug addiction, or sex addiction, or game addictions, or other forms of addictions that we would call co addictions that are
mhm,
actually the net result of other forms of trauma.
mm, mhm. No, thank you for that. And for yourself, when you were kind of at, you could say more of the peak before your kind of crash and your burnout, what was your sex life like with your partner? Was it like kind of it didn't exist, or was it kind of very passionate but disconnected, or what were some of your own experience like that? I'm curious, and then how that connects to now your work with sensuality and sexuality and working with people in that way.
Yeah, disconnected, very
Yeah.
disconnected. It was actually one of those relationships that I think should last one night rather than a marriage, if
Rather
I'm
than a
being
marriage.
completely honest. Um, it was founded on the wrong foundations. Let's just call a
Mhm.
cat a cat. It was a very passionate relationship, but not the kind of passion that's sustainable, the kind of passion that gets you burned, right?
Mm,
So it was a very volatile relationship, a very high
mhm,
octane relationship, and the lines of communication were actually very poor. And
mm,
I say that now because I'm in a very calm relationship. So the contrast is almost sort of two worlds apart. It feels like
mhm,
I've also become a different versions through the different relationship that I'm in now. Not to say
Mhm.
that my
Mhm.
current marriage is not a passionate one, but the passion that is a sustainable, loving, and kind and benevolent, where I genuinely want the best for him and he genuinely wants the best for me. Whereas
Mhm.
the previous one, there was a lot more ego, a lot more clashes, a lot more conflicts, and there was a sort of a speed to the relationship that was very qui pro quo, right? There was a lot of tit for tats
Mhm.
and not a lot of support and love and selfless acts of service, for example, which there
Mm.
is a whole lot now in my current marriage. So I think
Mhm.
that's a for me that's a very big contrast.
Mhm. And, for clients you're working with that are kind of breaking free from the work addiction and the burnout, like, where do you feel like the best um, steps can be able to have then the healthy sensuality and sexuality? And for myself, I'm working a lot with sexuality and retreats and clients, and I'm always curious to. One of the things that's been interesting for me is just to see where I can actually start to bridge some of the gap between the much more like secular people that come for sexuality work compared to bringing some of those things into more corporate environment. But I'm curious from your perspective, like where do you feel like some of those pieces can be connected to support some of your clients in that way?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, and truthfully, I think it has a lot to do with your state.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is when you are in a stressed state,
Mm-hmm.
yes, you may have high libido, right? You may want to have that, hot and passionate when you get home, but almost like a release or almost like a one and done, as opposed to I'm so happy to be back home and I'm delighted to be in your presence. And, I want to look in your eyes and I love the way you smell and I love the way I feel around you. Like that to me, that's much more aligned with the current vision that I have in my marriage where we meet when we're our best versions of self, right? So
Mm-hmm.
our love making comes from a place of being grounded and happy as opposed
Mm.
to quick release or sort of had a rough day or that
How
to
do
me
Yeah.
is a reflection of your state. So I think when
Mm.
you're in a state that is a state where you're more reflective, where
Mm-hmm.
you're less addicted to whatever the substance may be, you have so much more to give to your partner, but also your partner can meet you exactly where you're at. So I have a lot of my clients going through burnout that are actually in what I call sexless marriages. So that's not something that's ever happened to me, not in the past, and definitely not in my current marriage. But I have a lot of experience from secondhand experience of being at the receiving end of the stories. And typically it goes, I'm too exhausted, I'm
Mm.
so busy. I like sex is the last thing on my mind. I can't even get to sleep, let alone get to think about how to please her or how to please him, right? So
Mm.
it's actually extremely common to be in sexless relationship, and it kind of breeds all kind of insecurities because again it's a vicious circle that would lead the partners to then seek comfort in work. So then the person works more because why stay in bed? Your partner doesn't really give attention to you or
Mm-hmm.
doesn't give a fuck whether you're in bed or not. So you might as well get up and get paid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Get up, get paid, and get shit done.
Get shit done, get that promotion, get that bonus, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And when it comes to emotions and working with emotions and witnessing people's relationship with emotions, yeah, I find, especially for individuals that have never done any type of somatic work or emotional release work or, being with more of their anger and their sadness, which, with some of the big T, the stronger traumatic events, usually that's what's underneath the belly of so much of it. Where do you see, or how do you kind of support the navigation of that with clients in, because I imagine you're doing a fair amount of online sessions. I do a lot of online sessions as well. And like, navigating that in healthy ways to support someone to actually have a change in their own emotional body, because that is where I see the greatest change that needs to happen, is actually being able to feel our emotions and not suppress them. And then all these, things don't really arrive in that way. But how do you, work with that with clients, and how do you visualize that, supporting them to have a healthier relationship with their emotions? Because a lot of people are terrified of feeling anger and sadness, and all the thought and ideas and beliefs on what that means when they're angry or sad.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And actually, a lot of it is working with repressed memories and emotion. So that's why I use the tool of clinical hypnotherapy. And if I can give you a no-name basis example of one of my clients who was really struggling with erectile dysfunction for many, many years and feeling a lot of performance anxiety with multiple different female partners.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't matter, at least as far as he was telling me, whether he was in a loving relationship or more of a, sort of, I don't want to say one night stand, but a sort of looser relationship, he still felt a lot of performance anxiety, a lot of discomfort, a lot of lack of confidence, and he couldn't really pinpoint where that stemmed from. And so we did a little bit of work on a coaching basis, but I could see that this wasn't really going anywhere, because it's not so much that he was not willing to share, is that he couldn't consciously pinpoint to the root cause. So what I like to think as the event. So what is the primary event that's ever happened that shifted your belief around sexuality and around the fact that sex for you had to be a performance, or there was something to be anxious about, or there was something for you to do in a specific way? So what I did with him, and he was, more than happy to do that and gave me full consent and permission, is that I installed a trance state with a series of suggestions that we had agreed upon, and they were aligned with his holistic well-being and overarching goal, to unroot that primary event and to see if we could reform any memories or recollect anything that he might have gone through that could be pinpointed to where he started to feel different about his body and about his sexuality. And it turned out that at summertime, many, many moons ago, in fact, when he was a little boy, although he was under adult supervision when the kids were playing, one of the boy had been playing with him and was quite indecent, and he'd been molested, and it was very embarrassing for him because he was in a house with parents, but that was happening all up in the attic because the kids were playing. And he formed a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
belief that because he got aroused with that interaction, that he was going to be aroused more around men, because that boy was, it was a boy to boy interaction. And hence, although he grew up a heterosexual man, he felt immense pressure at an unconscious level to satisfy a woman, because he formed that early on belief that he was getting aroused by a boy and he was also in a position to arouse a boy. So there
Mm-hmm.
was so much work to do around untangling, but also that was a repressed memory. He did
Mm-hmm.
not consciously not he didn't consciously remember it up until the point that came up in hypnotherapy, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that is so fascinating, isn't it? That you can access the unconscious mind to recall a memory that is real and that is accurate, but that was repressed. And from that point onward, we could recall, unroot, and recover. And
Mm-hmm.
that has actually unfolded in him being able to rekindle his perceived sexuality and to engage with a desired woman that he intended to be sexual with in a very conscious way without any erectile dysfunction or performance anxiety.
Amazing. Amazing. Good work.
It's one example.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right.
No, it's it's especially in being a man and working with a lot of men. The men's retreats I run are kind of deep dive initiations for men into a lot of the areas that they never discuss around their sexuality and emotions, and we do a lot of embodiment. it's remarkable actually how much men, the levels of shame and conditioning and the programming that it's kind of instilled in at a young age. And then we look at society, like a man's emotions and a man's issues and the things that are underneath the surface never really have much of a time and a space. And to me, it's examples like this that really showcase that, especially around our sexual conditioning, so you don't feel like we have any place to really go. um, so I'm curious for you, like in what you're doing, like where is your edge right now? Where is your edge in your own personal life around your emotions or your sexuality or your leadership? Like, what are some of the things that you're leaning into and discovering more about? Because that's one thing I really, as being an embodiment coach and somatic facilitator, and both working in these fields, like I know for myself, I trust and lean into the facilitators and the coaches that I know are consciously not just talking about the work, but doing the work. And that's an example of showing up and being the best student for your own self, and so you can be a better facilitator. So where are some of your edges that you're leaning into around emotions and sexuality and leadership and these things? I'm curious.
How much time do we have? 10 minutes, right? My goodness.
10 minutes.
So first of all, I'm gonna say, like, A, I really love that question. And B, like, not only do I honor that you asked that, but a bit like you, like, I wouldn't really trust a facilitator or a coach that's not getting coached themselves. So I have at least
Exactly.
3 coaches, and that's on a good month, right?
Amazing.
I
Amazing.
am work in progress, and I do have a series of big T trauma that, although I have worked through over the years, like, I know will stay with me and have stayed with me, and they will resurface in terms of trigger as life happens, right? So
Yeah.
what I'm working on right now, which is something that is quite personal for me to share publicly, but I think it's only fair considering the role that I have in my client's life, is navigating the public appearance of being a keynote speaker and doing all the work that I do, which demands a lot of travel. So I have a global team, and I have global engagement. So I'm constantly, one week in Asia, the other week in New York, etc., and navigating my desire to be a mom. So
Mm.
I'm closer to my 40s than I am to my 30s. It's,
Mhm. Mhm.
no secret. I'm pretty open about my age, and being in a really beautiful marriage and, loving my husband so much. It's one of our desire to grow a family, but it's a lot of work and moving pieces around the timing of the pregnancy and the engagements and the keynotes and how that can work and, potentially affect clients, etc. So that piece is a piece that I'm currently working on and getting coached on as well,
Mhm.
to really honor that space, especially because I do a lot of work with expecting mom and pregnancy. So I'm really, really passionate. And I was a stepmom in my previous marriage, so
Mhm.
parenting is something that's close to my heart. So
Mhm.
I would say that that's my biggest sort of work in progress at the
Mm.
moment, is the
Mhm.
path of motherhood and the path of conceiving and becoming a mom. That's my current path.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, that's a one very near and dear to me right now, with our little one coming in the world in about a
Oh.
month and a half. So well, yeah, 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 yeah. And it's it's an interesting look at a question of values, and knowing a lot of very, especially for women, like I have a lot of friends that are high performance coaches and facilitators in a very kind of global life, and them stepping into the world of motherhood, it was just like not a total shift, but just a rewiring of sometimes what's most important. I mean, nature, and bringing a baby into this world is like all that energy that was over there, that's now going in there. It's fascinating, even with my partner Natasha. So she's always kind of researching what's happening in the brain and how the brain is impacted through pregnancy, and how the focus literally, like completely biologically, is just a shift into everything goes into this child. And that part that used to be able to manage a global business, I'm sure it'll still be there, but at a different state.
Yes.
um
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's tough when you are, effectively the face of the company, and
Mm,
you have such a global role, especially when you have the company. So that's an identity shift that I'm currently working on, so that it's not this or that, it's this and that, because I have the absolute belief that I can really do both and do it
mhm,
well.
mhm,
But it's how to put the pieces together and make it happen, and be really staying on track to prioritizing your health and well-being, while also wanting to continue to serve my clients at the highest level, um,
mhm.
and be a mom. So it's not all, it's all and, right? But
Yeah, it's
it's
all pieced together. And
obvious.
and being a woman that helps people access more of their intuition, and what does your intuition guide you towards around your journey into motherhood? Is there a few children coming? Is this something that's
Yes,
going to
definitely. Yes. Yes. 100%. Yes, yes.
amazing?
I do see that very much so in the cards, and I think it's a beautiful piece of life. I mean, the closest experience I've had to motherhood is, when I was raising my stepson. Of course, it's going to be a very different journey, but from what I've experienced so far, every single part of me wants to experience that again. And I've never experienced pregnancy, so
Right,
that's something that I've always wanted, and I think it's such a blessing.
beautiful. So last question before we close, and I'm sure we could talk about this one a long time, but
Oh,
in this role of, potentially going into the role of mother and having a partner in your life, how do you feel the dynamic of, like, the male being the provider, or are you still, co-financially supporting, and being a strong businesswoman that's, financially supporting yourself? And how do you feel that with stepping into the role of the mother? Like, is there a expectation, desire that he's completely financially supporting, or is it a co-support together? What's your business spidey sense on this one? It's many layers to it, but and just tell me your thoughts.
yeah, it's a great question. I love that very much, and I think it's an important question to navigate, and something that we talk about quite openly with my husband. And his vision is very aligned with mine. So we don't really think of it as who is the main provider. We think of it of whose season of life is the season within which they need the most support, right? So that's
Mm,
really our vision. So it's not really sex orientated. So for me, it's not a gender question. It's not whether he's a man and I'm a woman and therefore he should provide or I should provide, because I've been able in my life to provide a lot of financial securities to people I love. And he also has the same capacity. So he has
mm,
provider capacity, I have provider capacity. The way we look at it, and because we're both entrepreneur, that really helps. We look at it as my pregnancy will be a season of my life where
mhm,
his support will be more important than ever. But at the same time, I've also anticipated that, being a professional and a type A, by putting measures in place financially and business wise, so that that period of my life can happen and I can feel really secured about it. I think it's also important to say that when you're in a marriage, you can lean on to your partner more during a season of your life, right? Like this idea that you need to be fiercely independent and you need to be a feminist about it all. Like, this is not me. Like, I love leaning on him, and I also love the fact that he can lean on me at different seasons of his life, right? So
mhm, mhm,
it's not in my opinion, it's not a gender conversation. It's where are you at and who can support the other.
mhm,
And do you have
mhm,
more financial capacity right now? Do you have more physical capacity to do more work? Do you need some time off? Well, then let me fill in, right? It's not because you're a man or a woman, it's because you can and I can't, right? That's
mhm.
the idea. So that's our philosophy, and it's very aligned. But I love the idea that he can take care of me for a while, and I love the idea that in the future I can take care of him for a while.
Amazing, amazing. Sounds like a perfect balance. So before we close together, if people want to find out more about your work and the things that you're doing in the world, what's the best way to send them?
That will be through my podcast as well. Just like you, I have a show. So the Charlene Gisele show, if you want to learn more about burnout, it's weekly. explanation around what burnout does to your brain and your overall well-being. So if you want to drop into that. And then the second way, as a gift, it will be to understand where you're at on your burnout recovery. So I have a free burnout assessment test. It will be a really good healthy point for you to get started, just to understand where you're at and what tools could help you. So those are two complementary resources that I would love to share with the world.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Charlene. Thank you for joining this. I really appreciate the humans that you're supporting on this planet, especially around burnout and hypnotherapy. And yeah, it sounds like you're doing powerful and amazing work, and appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for tuning in. This has been another episode of Love, Sex, and Leadership. Please like or subscribe, and we'd love to see you here again. Have an amazing day.